Next we have the definition of orthogonal vectors. We say that u and v are orthogonal to each other if inner product uv is 0. So from the definition itself, it's very clear that whenever u is orthogonal to v, then v is orthogonal to u. So that is why we say that u and v are orthogonal vectors. So whether I say that u is orthogonal to v or v is orthogonal to u, it means the same. So next we see that if u is orthogonal to w, then scalar times u will also be orthogonal to w because of this reason. And if u and v are orthogonal to w, then what we can say about the sum of the vectors? Even the sum is orthogonal to the same vector because of this reason. Now we have seen already that inner product of 0 with any vector is always 0. So this implies that 0 is orthogonal to whatever may be the vector that you consider. Okay, so for every v in v, so 0 is orthogonal to every v in capital V. Right. So now if W is a subspace of V, the orthogonal complement of W. So what we do in W perpendicular, sometimes it is also termed as W perp, it consists of all those vectors of V which are orthogonal to all the elements of W. It's something like your annihilator. It looks like the annihilator definition and this are the same. So you have all those vectors which are orthogonal to all the elements of W is collected, and that is your W perpendicular, and that is termed as orthogonal complement of W. Now when we consider V perpendicular, what will be that, or what are those vectors which are orthogonal to all the elements of capital V? It can only be 0 because of this reason. Okay, so and the same is 0, the subspace singleton 0 perpendicular, when you consider by the definition, it is all those vectors which are orthogonal to 0. So all the elements of V are orthogonal to 0 because of this. So you have 0 perpendicular to be equal to V and V perpendicular to be singleton 0. Now next we have this lemma which states that this W perpendicular, it is not only a non-empty subcollection, but it is also a subspace of V. So 0 is orthogonal to all the elements of W, and therefore 0 belongs to W perpendicular, showing that W perpendicular is non-empty. And if AB belong to W perpendicular, then we consider for alpha, beta in F and all W in capital W, alpha A plus beta B, inner product of alpha A plus beta B with W. So this is nothing but in alpha into inner product AW plus beta into inner product BW, and these two inner products are 0 because your A is orthogonal to all the elements of W, and B is orthogonal to all the elements of W because they are members of W perpendicular. Therefore W perpendicular, so you have this, for it to be a member of W perpendicular, this is the condition required. If only this condition is satisfied, that element can belong to W perpendicular. So by the definition of W perpendicular, we conclude that W perpendicular is a subspace of V. Okay, so now we can easily prove even this result, that having got W and W perpendicular, if we consider their intersection, will it be singleton 0 or something else? We are going to show that it is just singleton 0. So you consider an arbitrary element in W intersection W perpendicular, which means that this element is present in W as well as in W perpendicular. So by the definition of W perpendicular, if X belongs to W perpendicular, then inner product of X with W should be 0 for all W in W. So in particular, by taking your W as X, because your X belongs to W, so you replace this W by X so that you will have inner product XX is to be 0. So by IP2, that is positive definiteness, this implies that X has to be 0, right? So you have W intersection W perpendicular to be singleton 0. Next we have orthonormal set of vectors. So if we have if we consider the vectors v1 etc. v, and we say that v is an orthonormal set if it satisfies the two conditions, namely each vi should be of length 1. It should be of length 1. That means inner product vi with itself should be 1. Each vector should be of length 1. Meaning is this. And whenever I consider cross terms like v1 with v2 or v1 with v3, v2 with v4, in general inner product vi with vj I not equal to j. So in that case the inner product should be 0. Inner product of two vectors is always a scalar. So you have if these two conditions are true, then you call your v1 etc. vn to be an orthonormal set. Now there is a property possessed by an orthonormal set, that orthonormal set of vectors, that they are linearly independent. If I am given an orthonormal set, then it has to be linearly independent. So that is what is proved in this lemma. Whenever we want to show that a collection is linearly independent, we have to consider the linear combination equated to the zero identity element, the zero element of the vector space V. So it's a vector, and so when we consider because of this equal to 0, this is vector 0. So inner product of vector 0 with any vector should be 0. That is scalar 0. This is scalar 0. This is vector 0. So replacing the 0 by this vector, we get this, and by the definition, that is IP3, we can rewrite this as alpha 1 v1 with vi, v2 with vi, and so on. Somewhere here you will have vi, so you will have only in that case value to be 1. Other scalars will become 0, and that is v1 with vi, inner product vn with vi, all of them will become 0, leaving only this. So that gives you alpha I. So but this scalar already 0 you have, and that happens to be alpha I. So you have your linearly for linearly independent set of vectors, the condition required is the linear combination equated to the 0 element of V should imply that each scalar is scalar 0. So that is established here, and therefore given an orthonormal set of vectors, they must be linearly independent. Then it's an easy computation that inner product of W with Vi, if we take the whole lot to be this, then because of this reason, because of this and this reason, we have to have inner product W with Vi to be just alpha I. Next we have this lemma which states that if V1 etc. Vn is an orthonormal set in V and W belongs to capital V, then any vector which is written in this way, is orthogonal to each vector v1, v2 and so on vn. So each of these vectors will be in such a way that this u will be orthogonal to each of them. So let v1 etc. vn be an orthonormal set and w belong to capital V be such that u is written as for any u. Okay, for any u which is written in this way that we consider, and our job is to show that inner product of u with vi, because this is orthogonal to each of this. So that means inner product u with vi we shall consider. So we replace u by the representation what is given here. So that with vi, so only vi with vi will have value, otherwise it is 0. This is a scalar, it will come out as such, no conjugate. So vi with vi only will give you 1. So you are left with w, inner product of w with vi, but already you have w with vi, so that is also there. So that is there, but the rest of the terms, this one will be 0, this one will be 0 when I find the inner product with vi. This one will also be not there. So what are the terms that will remain? Only w and these this one. So these two are there. So w with vi we have written, and from here we have minus w with vi inner product. So those two will get cancelled, giving 0, and this is scalar 0. So thus u is orthogonal to each of v1 etc. vn. Now comes the process of converting an ordinary basis, that is any basis, into an orthonormal basis. So orthonormal basis means what? We have to have basis elements in which inner product of Vi with Vj should be 1 if I equals j and 0 if I is not equal to j. So from let V be of dimension n over f, and let V1 etc. Vn be a basis of capital V. From this basis we shall construct an orthonormal set of n vectors w1 etc. wn. The process goes like this. You consider w1 as v1 by norm v1, where v1 is non-zero vector because it is linearly independent. It must be non-zero. So when we consider norm of w1, obviously that's 1. Name that as equation 1. We need it. Consider u2. So this has to be remembered. We are going to construct our w's for which we need this u2, which is written as v2 minus inner product v2 with w1. See, w1 you have got already, and v2 is known to us already. So with the help of those two, we are going to consider our u2 in this way. Now having got this vector u2, we have to show that it's non-zero, and inner product of u2 with w1 is 0. Now suppose these two claims, these two are required in order to have our w1 and w2 to form an orthonormal set. Okay, so for that purpose only we claim this. So u2 is not equal to 0, and inner product u2 with w1 is 0. Suppose u2 is 0, say. Then what will happen to this equation? It will be v2 minus inner product v2 with w1 0. Now we shall name this as alpha, so that this is not okay. The v2 this is actually v1. If you have just w1 means, there is no need to have norm v1 here. But if you are going to have v1 here, then in the denominator we will have our norm v1. So either you write inner product, your alpha is minus inner product v2 with w1, or if you want to have along with norm means, this should not be w1, this has to be v1. If you want to have norm v1, the denominator, nothing wrong in keeping this as just alpha is equal to minus inner product v2 w1 without this. Okay, so if norm comes in the denominator, this has to be v1 and not w1, right? So you have here non-zero scalar. Here you don't have the scalar to be 0. It is 1 actually. It is not equal to 0. So you have v1 and v2 to be linearly dependent. That's a contradiction because the entire collection is linearly independent. As for linearly independent set of vectors are concerned, any sub-collection will also be linearly independent, and therefore we get a contradiction to our statement P. Therefore u2 cannot be 0. So u2 cannot be 0. And second one, we have to establish this, for which you consider the LHS inner product u2 with w1. u2 is replaced by v2 minus inner product v2 w1. So v2 with w1 and this one, see, this is a scalar, it comes out. It's a scalar, it comes out. You are left with minus sign, that's taken out. W1 inner product w1 with w1. So it is v2 with w1 written. This minus sign should be taken out. This is a scalar, it comes out as such because it is in the first place. And the what is remaining, inner product of w1 with w1. But this is 1. Okay, so you have inner product v2 with w1 minus inner product v2 with w1, that gives us 0, and that's your RHS. Now we proceed to define our w2. w1 is already defined as v1 by norm v1. So it is not that in the same way that we can define w2 as v2 by norm v2, it is not so. Okay, so for w2 we need to have this u2 defined as said earlier, and then only come to this. Now there we claim that u2 is non-zero, and we have also proved that inner product u2 with w1 is 0. So when I describe my w2 as u2 by norm u2, then 1 by norm u2 will come out. 1 by norm u2 will come out, so that you will have inner product of u2 with w1, but that is already 0. that is already 0, and that is why you get W2, inner product of W2 with W1 to be 0 is only because of the second subdivision in the previous claim. So you have and we also notice that now W2 is equal to 1. Now we consider U3. So we have got W1, W2 to be the set, W1, W2 to be an orthonormal set. Now we shall consider U3, which is V3 minus inner product V3 with W1, W1 minus inner product V3 with W2, W2. So previously we had V2 minus U2 means V2 minus inner product V2, W1, W1. We stop with that. But now for U3, 3 terms should be there. They are V3 and then inner product of V3 with W1 into W1 minus inner product of V3 with W2 into W2. So having got U3 as this, what is that we are going to claim? U3 is non-zero and inner product of U3 with W1 as 0, inner product of U3 with W2 0. So only if we establish this, we can easily say that inner product of W3 with W1. W3 will be defined as we did in the previous case, U2 by norm U2 for W2 we had. So in the same way here we will be having U3 by norm U3. So for that purpose we want to have W1, W2, W3 to be orthonormal set. So for which this has to be claimed. So suppose U3 is 0, then from this one we get this. You can have it as this W1 becomes V1 by norm V1, V1 by norm V1, and this one will be V2 by this one, V2 by norm V2, sorry, U2 by norm U2, right? So you have, and that will involve this U2 will involve again V1 and V2. That will involve V1 and V2. So what are those scalars that explicitly we are not writing? In fact, all these are to be replaced. This W2 is to be replaced by U2 by norm U2, and that U2 will involve W2. So this is not correct. You will have some more terms, and similarly this is also not correct. You will have some more terms, but nothing is explicitly need to be written. So you can just say that on simplification you will have beta V1 plus some other delta V2 plus V3. Such terms will be present. Okay, so you have a linear combination in which obviously one non-zero. See, we are not bothered about these two. Whether there are some terms within that will get cancelled, but some scalar times V1 will be there, some scalar times V2 will be there. So what we have here, what we need to notice is you have 1 into V3. Okay, so that is obviously a non-zero scalar. So a linear combination of vectors, not all 0, such that the linear combination is 0 means the vectors V1, V2, V3 are linearly dependent. They depend on each other. So that's a contradiction, and therefore U3 cannot be 0. So the first part of it we have claimed, and in the same way inner product U3 with W1 we want to establish it to be 0, and similarly U3 with W2. Now if you consider U3 with W1, you have to replace U3 by V3 minus inner product V3 W1 W1, inner product V3 W2 with inner product V3 with W2 into W2 along with that W1. So this with this, so that we have written, and then this has to go out, and you are left with W1 W1 and this one W2 W1. So we know them to be this one to be 0 and this is 1. So inner product V3 with W1 minus V3 with W1, they get cancelled giving 0, and that's your RHS. So in the same way we have to establish the second one also, inner product U3 with W2. Again replace U3 by this, and then now you find the inner product with W2. So that this one will become 1, and here V3 with W2 you will have. So that will get cancelled with this, and this is already 0 we know, because W1 W2 forms an the set W1 W2 forms an orthonormal set. So now if we describe our W3 as U3 by norm U3, we have this U3 to be non-zero by the previous claim, and these two are inference. So we have norm W3 also to be 1. It's very obvious. So what we get is W1, W2, W3. This set is an orthonormal set. Now proceeding like this, after n steps, we arrive at W1, W2, Wn, where Wn is Un by norm Un, with Un not equal to 0 and norm W1, Wn to be 1. And Wn will be orthogonal to W1, W2, W3 and so on, Wn minus 1, proving that this is an orthonormal set. So by the lemma, an orthonormal set of vectors is always linearly independent. So the number of vectors being n and any basis has n elements means the dimension of V is n, and this is linearly independent. It is enough. By one of the problems we have already established that this becomes a basis. They are linearly independent, they are n in number, dimension of V is n, and therefore it forms a basis. Now we have the last theorem of the section. If V is finite dimensional inner product space and W is the subspace of V, then V is the direct sum of W and W perpendicular. As a subspace of the inner product space V, W itself is an inner product space. Now we can find an orthonormal set, that is by Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process. So you have W, you can always find these vectors which are orthonormal and which also forms the basis of W. Now if V belongs to capital V, then we can have, just now we proved such a combination to be orthogonal to W1 etc. WR. So they will be orthogonal to W. Why W? Because W is spanned by, or rather W can be uniquely written in terms of this. So when my U is orthogonal to each of this, U has to be orthogonal to W also. So whatever may be my W, okay, so which means that my U belongs to W perpendicular. W perpendicular means it is all those vectors which are orthogonal to all the elements of W. So we have this U to be orthogonal to whatever may be by W. Why? Because any W can be uniquely written as the linear combination of these basis elements, and U is orthogonal to each of them. So naturally my U will be orthogonal to W also, which can be written in terms of the basis elements. So U belongs to W perpendicular. Now since V is equal to U plus, you have this. Obviously this is a linear combination of W1 etc. WR, and my U belongs to W perpendicular. So by commutativity I can have it over here and this one over here, so that this will be a member of W and this is a member of W perpendicular, and therefore my capital V is contained in W plus W perpendicular. W is a subspace and W perpendicular is also a subspace of V. So W plus W perpendicular will be a subspace of V. So W plus W perpendicular contained in V is known already, and from here V is contained in. So this actually implies that your V is contained in W plus W perpendicular. So combining these two inclusions, we conclude that V is the direct sum of, V is the sum of these two. Now already we know that W intersection W perpendicular is singleton 0. This is already established. W intersection W perpendicular is singleton 0 is established. So by the definition of direct sum, or we can also say that by the necessary and sufficient condition for V to be the direct sum of two subspaces, we have that V to be the direct sum of W and W perpendicular. Now as we had in the case of annihilator of W is equal to W, using the same concept we can also establish that annihilator of W perpendicular is equal to W. This is similar to that of, the concept is similar to that of annihilator of W is equal to W. So what we do here is, as we did in that case, one is contained in the other, that is W is contained in W perpendicular. So this first we have to establish, and because V is finite dimensional, W perpendicular, all of them will be finite dimensional. So one is contained in the other and both of them are of the same dimension. So if we establish these two, then we can easily say that equality holds. W, dimension of W should be same as dimension of W perpendicular. So we have first we will see this dimension of W is equal to this. Since the sums are direct dimension of W, that is the representation. See how we represent the same representation helps us in concluding that dimension of W is equal to dimension of W perpendicular. So this is one way of establishing. Another way is this, that is dimension of B we have to be dimension of W plus dimension of W perpendicular minus dimension of W intersection W perpendicular. But we know that W intersection W perpendicular is singleton 0. So we have because dimension of W intersection W perpendicular is 0, dimension of V will just become this. So from here what we conclude is dimension of W perpendicular is dimension of V minus dimension of W. This is another way of proving the same corollary. This proof is somewhat similar to that of what we had in the previous section 4.3. Okay, so this is one argument with which you can prove the result. The other one is this. So when I consider W dimension of W perpendicular, what will be that? It will be dimension of W. See, when I have W perpendicular, this is subspace of V. So this is again a subspace of V only. So I will write this minus whatever here we had, we wrote here. So it will be dimension of W perpendicular. Now you can replace your dimension of W perpendicular by this. So when we replace this by this here, this dimension of V and dimension of V will get cancelled, giving minus of minus. So that is plus, so dimension of W. So we have got dimension of W to be equal to dimension of W perpendicular. Then to prove that W is contained in, W perpendicular, you take W in capital W. Then it's very obvious that for any U in W perpendicular, this W will be orthogonal to U. So you have U belonging to W perpendicular. So how we can interpret this as now W is orthogonal to all the elements of W perpendicular. So where should I have my W to be? My W should belong to W perpendicular. Just the application of the definition W perpendicular, we get obviously that W is contained in this. So this is proved, and this is somewhat easier than what is described over here. So and the concept is known to us already. So together and by the result which was established in section 4.2 in the solved problems, we conclude that dimension of V is equal to dimension of W to be equal to dimension of W perpendicular, and W is contained in this. Together we have W perpendicular to be equal to W. So that's our corollary.